Hello everybody, it is me, Vincent, and in today's video, I want to talk about the remnants of old Universal. Universal Orlando has been open since 1990, and in those 35 years, there have been a lot of changes. Brand new theme parks, brand new rides, and while a lot of these rides and attractions have gone away completely and will be dearly missed, there are still remnants and little pieces of them all throughout the park to maybe help you remember. In a previous video, I focused on the abandoned Universal, parts of the park and old rides and shows that are no longer being used at all. In this video, I want to show you guys some Universal history that's still being used daily here in the park in ways that you might not think about. So let's head on over to the first park, the OG that started it all in 1990, Universal Studios Florida. There is a lot of old Universal history there. Watch out. So we're actually starting this video off a little bit more towards the back of the park in good old San Francisco. And I wanted to start this video off with the remnant of old Universal that really kind of inspired this whole video. The San Francisco area of the park right now is currently known for two things. We have Chez Alcatraz, the very popular bar with all the Jaws themed drinks, and then, of course, everyone's favorite ride, Fast and Furious Supercharged. You enter Fast and Furious as if you're coming from the New York area of the park and get let out into the San Fran section of the park. But many, many years ago, the exit of the Fast and Furious ride used to be the entrance of a long-running attraction here at the park. This big brick archway used to actually be the entrance to Earthquake, the big one. So Earthquake was one of Universal Studios Florida's opening day attractions, and this ride took you into a San Francisco subway station to experience an 8.3 magnitude earthquake, the big one. But before you did that, you learned how movies were made, specifically how big budget disaster films were made. And this ride actually had 3 different pre-shows where they would show off different elements of disaster movie making. The first room was dedicated to the weather, and they had different windows, and they would show you how in films they would make it look like it was fall, like it was snowing, like it was raining. Then in the second room, they actually had a big giant set piece from the earthquake film that the ride was based off of, and you could see how they would be able to destroy this little set to make it look like a big city was being destroyed. And then the third pre-show involved them getting guests from the audience to film disaster scenes in front of everybody else, and you would watch it on a big screen, and that was pretty involved. You know, way back when Universal Studios Florida first opened up, there was a lot more shows in the park, more show elements versus just like straight up rides, and a lot of audience participation. And then the grand finale of the earthquake experience was that you would get on a subway tram on the Embarcadero station, which is a station in San Francisco, and you would go and you would experience the big one, a big mega earthquake where the tram shook, and a very iconic scene of a big gas tanker falling from the road above you down, causing a bunch of fire. A subway train would derail, and then there was this giant flood of water that would get the people on the right side of the tram wet. All of this chaos would be going on, and then you would hear the director go, "Cut!" and then everything would reverse and reset, and the train would go backwards, and that was the magic of movie making, folks. That is how they used to do things here at Universal Studios Florida. They put you in the movies, in the production. You can still experience, in a way, this version of Earthquake over at Universal Studios Hollywood, where it is a daily part of their tram tour. Then later, there was another version of the Earthquake ride that got rethemed called Disaster, a major motion picture starring you. This was kind of the same thing, where they showed off a lot of different special effects, how they made movies, but it was a little bit more fictitious. Disaster was meant to be like you were making a fake movie called Mother Nature, which featured The Rock and Francis Kincaid, who looked a lot like Christopher Walken. He was the director of this movie. And in the second room of the pre-show, you actually got some really great Musion technology where Christopher Walken was projected alongside a live actor that was taking you through Disaster. Then, ultimately, you get in the tram, all the special effects would go off just like Earthquake, but instead, all the live actors who volunteered in the third pre-show actually got to see themselves in a Mother Nature trailer on the tram as it was going back to the station. Honestly, it was a really fun ride experience. We love practical effects here at Universal, and I think if it was still here today, people would enjoy it still. The entrance to Earthquake and Disaster is actually where the exit of Fast and Furious is now. So when guests are walking out of the ride, or more specifically the entrance to the gift shop to Fast and Furious. That is where you would go to enter Earthquake and Disaster. And then guess what exit on the other side of the building closest to what is now Diagon Alley? There's currently a big gift shop there, but that was like the direct exit to the rides. That's where all the people walked out of the subway station once they were done with Earthquake. I just love this kind of stuff. I don't know, I'm one of those people that comes here to the parks and they go, hey, this is where the entrance used to be, this is where the exit used to be. I love seeing old history like that. I'd always kind of wondered what this was based off of San Francisco. You know, a lot of the buildings here in the park are based off of real things, and this one here, the entrance for Earthquake, kind of took a little bit of liberties, but this is actually based off of a real place, a real building in San Francisco. So if you're ever here in the park and you look up at the brick arch, there's initials for F and CHR Co. That is actually a real building in San Francisco called the Ferries and Cliff House Railway Company. And that is what the former entrance to Earthquake and Disaster is modeled after. That's because in San Francisco, there are cable cars. And when you look on the floor here in the San Francisco area of the park, there's a bunch of rails all over the place because, well, you're in San Francisco, right? This is a really great example of Universal history that is still here in the park physically, but is being used in a completely different way. Let me know in the comments down below, would you rather ride Fast and Furious Supercharged or go back on Earthquake and Disaster? I think I know the answer. But let's keep on going. There's some more Universal history to see around here. Watch out. Speaking of Jaws, I want to talk about another piece of old Universal that still exists here in the park that actually just got a recent big change that I'm not super happy about. Now, what I want to talk about are these restrooms over here. Yes, I'm in a tizzy about bathrooms. From the outside, they don't really look like much. They actually look pretty fresh, don't they? That's because they just got out of a big refurbishment, and now you have these nice, clean, black restrooms right next to Diagon Alley. But for a very long time, before this refurbishment, these restrooms used to be the very last holdout of what was Amity Village here at Universal Studios Florida, the former home of the Jaws ride. We love the Jaws ride here on this channel. You know I love the Jaws ride, and I used to go on this ride all the time here in the park. But a lot of you guys may or may not know or may not have realized it wasn't just Jaws. It was Amity Village. There's a whole area of the park themed to the town from the movie. And it was always 4th of July. We were celebrating the 4th of July here at Amity Village. And it really, I mean, theming-wise, wasn't super special. It was just like a New England, northeastern boardwalk town with a bunch of buildings. They had carnival games and funnel cake and hot dogs, very typical American food. Of course, it had the amazing, legendary Jaws ride. But Amity Village, just like the Jaws ride, went away in 2012 to make way for Diagon Alley. And with that, they basically took down all of Amity. That whole thing was gone. And there are some winks and nods to what used to be Amity Village in the Diagon Alley area of the park, but really, there would be no way to tell that the Jaws ride used to be here. Except for those who knew about the brown restroom building. I think it was the City Hall is what it was called. And these used to be the same restrooms that opened with the park with Amity Village. And as far as like bathrooms go, they were pretty just typical regular bathrooms, but there was a fun little Jaws reference on the signs. The women's sign for the restroom was missing a leg. That's because in the first movie, the girl who's swimming gets her leg chomped up by Jaws. And that was really fun, really great reference. When they redid these restrooms very recently, they got rid of that reference, and that to me is not very fun. So with the refurbishment of this bathroom, even though the building is exact same, there's definitely now no way to tell, like, oh, this is maybe a reference to Jaws? You know what I mean? Unfortunately, there's not really much left of Jaws here in the park, with the exception, of course, of the big shark that used to actually stand at the entrance of the ride. It's kind of over here in the corner now in San Francisco, next to Shea Alcatraz. You can get your pictures there. But as far as old school bathrooms go, they ain't got any of those here at Universal, which honestly might be a good thing in the grand scheme of things, because I would rather have like a new bathroom with like new toilets and all that stuff versus like an old bathroom. But I just miss Jaws, okay? That's really what I'm getting at here. Watch out. So this next bit of old Universal history that's still getting used in the park is kind of an interesting one, because it's a ride here in the park that used to be another ride with the same everything, the same ride system, the same building. You probably know what I'm talking about already. I am, of course, referring to the Simpsons ride, which formerly used to be Back to the Future, the ride. So Back to the Future opened in 1991 here at Universal Studios Florida, a year after the park had opened, and was one of the most popular rides here. It was of course based off the super famous, super iconic BTTF trilogy. And the ride was special because it took the motion simulator technology that had existed already at other theme parks and brought it up to the next level, to the future, some would say. Instead of being one big motion simulator box that you were in watching a screen, instead became a multi-level, multi-vehicle ride experience where all of the riders on the DeLoreans were looking at one giant, what they call OmniMax screen, which is basically like a curved IMAX screen. There were 3 different levels that you would get on, and all the riders would watch the film at the same time. Very different to how motion simulators were made at that time. If you think of something like Star Tours at Walt Disney World, it's just your standard simulator in a box. This got that idea and made it better. And this was a very popular ride here in the park. You got to ride on the DeLorean. The building was themed to the Institute of Future Technology, where you were visiting Doc Brown's labs, and you were one of his assistants, and you were helping him retrieve the DeLorean that Biff stole going through time. And that ride unfortunately went away in 2007 and was replaced with the Simpsons ride, which was legitimately replaced is a really good word to describe it, because all of the ride system stayed exactly the same. You were still on 3 levels, you were still looking at one big OmniMax screen. The difference, of course, was the theming, where previously you were in the Institute of Future Technology riding a DeLorean, and now you're at Krusty Land riding a Krusty Land roller coaster. So whenever you go to the Simpsons ride, basically the entire Back to the Future building was painted over blue to match with Krusty Land. There's that kind of 90s see-through tile style that's very, very from a certain era. That's from the Back to the Future Institute of Future Technology. The way you load onto the ride, the 3 levels, all of that is bar for bar what used to be BTTF. A lot of people like to say that it's so similar that even the ride profile, the way the ride moves, is just the exact same thing from Back to the Future, but I don't know if that's entirely true. I think the vehicles have been reprogrammed to at least match what's happening in the Simpsons ride. There used to be the actual train from the 3rd Back to the Future movie on display right next to the ride, but that has been since moved to the entrance of Springfield, where it's still there. You can see it. It's got its informational plaque that's an actual movie-used prop. There's also a DeLorean next to it as well, though that I don't think is necessarily from the movies. I don't think they've ever really had a DeLorean that was used in the Back to the Future movies. The actual DeLorean that they used to have way back when was the one that they used for filming the ride movie. You know what I mean? Back to the Future is one of those rides, just like Jaws. People miss it dearly, and I do hope it finds some way back into the park. But for now, until the time comes, maybe you could ride with your phone and sit in the back row of The Simpsons and watch the Back to the Future film and pretend you're on the ride. Watch out. So this next remnant of old Universal is one that was actually, up until very recently, used a lot. And I would say it was probably getting used every 20 to 30 seconds. That is the old Firehouse 89 building, and up until August of 2025, Rip Ride Rocket, the roller coaster that opened in 2009, would fly through this and take your picture. But before it was used for Rip Ride Rocket, this firehouse had a much more important use. This was the entrance to the former Ghostbusters Spooktacular attraction here at the park. Ghostbusters Spooktacular was a special effects show that actually opened with Universal Studios Florida in 1990 and closed in 1996. And this firehouse, of course, is modeled after the firehouse from the Ghostbusters movies. Out of all things here in this video, this is actually one of the only things I didn't get to experience as a kid. So I have to live off of all the wonderful videos that are out there about this attraction. And 6 years for a ride or a show here at Universal is a pretty short amount of time. But Ghostbusters Spooktacular was a show that kind of operated very similar to what used to be Twister Ride It Out over at the Jimmy Fallon ride. There was a pre-show where you were brought into the Ghostbusters world, all the characters from the movies were there, and then you would head into a big theater where all the ghosts from the movies would appear, and the Ghostbusters would fight Gozer in front of the temple, in front of all the guests. with crazy special effects. This show was one of the best examples of Pepper's ghost technologies. If you think of the technology that's used in like the Haunted Mansion to make ghosts appear with screens and reflections, this show was all about that. And people used to enter here at the firehouse. Nowadays, it's a little bit in limbo, as you can see. Rip Ride Rockit, the big roller coaster here at Universal Studios, closed in August of 2025. And right now, at the time of filming this video, we don't really know what's going to be taking its place. There are some big construction walls around this area, and there is a fun little wink and nod construction sign referencing the restoration of the Firehouse 89. So maybe this is Universal's way of telling us that Ghostbusters will be making an appearance again here in the parks in the future. Funny enough, right by the firehouse is actually the New York Public Library, which played a big part in the Ghostbusters movies as well. This was in the first scene of the film where they go and see the librarian ghost. And here at the park at Universal, this is actually where they used to do a Ghostbusters outdoor show where the Ghostbusters would come out and face Beetlejuice and dance to currently trendy songs. You gotta have a dance show here at the park. Why not make the Ghostbusters do it, right? Let me know down below in the comments if you think it would be cool to enter the firehouse one more time in a Ghostbusters themed roller coaster, because I think that would be pretty awesome. Watch out. Another remnant of old Universal history is actually right here at the front of the park, and this is something that maybe a lot of you watching this video never got to experience. Right here at the front of the park is the Wicked Experience, which is this giant shop that has tons of Wicked merchandise, costumes from the movies, and sometimes even the characters from the movies come here and meet guests. Many, many years ago, before it became the Wicked Experience, it was I Love Lucy, a tribute. This essentially was a museum dedicated to Lucille Ball and the I Love Lucy show, which your grandparents will probably tell you a lot about. It was a very iconic and influential show in the early days of television. And Lucy had a tribute here at Universal all the way until 2015. Think of this as like a mini museum where one whole wing of the building was dedicated to the I Love Lucy show, and they went into the behind the scenes of what it was like to film a sitcom. They actually had a lot of the old Oscars that the show had actually won, and costumes from I Love Lucy. I used to be a big ride chicken when I'd come here to Universal, so I would never do any of the rides. So I love to do all the extra stuff. And even though maybe I had never really watched a lot of I Love Lucy, I went through this exhibit all the time. I always thought it was so cool to see all the sets and the costumes and the Oscars, even played episodes of I Love Lucy in here. And even though now there's not really any obvious way to tell what used to be here in the building, this was the exact building that was used, the exact layout of what used to be here with the I Love Lucy tribute. Museums here in the park dedicated to film and TV history is not something you really get nowadays here at Universal, and it makes me definitely think more of when the park used to be about the magic of movie making versus being immersed into the movies. You know what I mean? Watch out. And lastly, we are leaving Universal Studios Florida and heading to Islands of Adventure, where I really only have one thing I want to show you guys. Truthfully, since this park opened in 1999, Islands of Adventure hasn't really had a lot of major changes. I mean, there's been big additions, right? But it hasn't gone through as much transformation compared to Universal Studios Florida. But there is one big ride that used to exist at this park that a lot of people still talk about, and that is Dueling Dragons. Dueling Dragons was a part of the once bigger Lost Continent in an area known as Merlinwood. And as you were heading into the ride, you entered an old abandoned castle where you learned the story about the Ice Dragon, Blizzrock, and the Fire Dragon, Pyrock, who were dueling eternally, Dueling Dragons. This ride was known for having a really great detailed queue where you would go through the castle and see all of the different knights who attempted to battle these dragons and were not very successful. You would see suits of armor on fire, you would see horses on their knights frozen, and then you would go through the catacombs in the dark with a bunch of skulls and skeletons, and it was actually kind of a little spooky, a little scary. And then ultimately, you would reach the bottom of the castle, where you got to choose thy fate. You took left for the Fire Dragon and right for the Ice Dragon. And then you got on the roller coaster. But Dueling Dragons existed for a long time, and even when it got turned over to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter in 2010, it still remained just as a different type of ride. It was now known as Dragon Challenge, and the dragons no longer dueled. You still went through a big castle though, And the castle is really what I'm talking about as far as things that are left over. This queue for Dueling Dragons, Dragon Challenge, and now the very popular Hagrid's Motorbike Adventure has been the same type of castle throughout its entire iteration. Obviously the theming has changed, but there are core sections that have always kind of remained the same, just themed and decorated in different ways. There are two specific spots that I always think of when I'm going through the Hagrid's queue that remind me of what used to be. There's that one hallway that you go down with all the windows on the left and all the dragon eggs on the right. That hallway, when it was Dragon Challenge, used to have a bunch of dangling candles like Hogwarts, and then when it was Dueling Dragons, this is where you'd see a lot of the frozen knights. And then of course, everyone's favorite part of the Hagrid queue, when you're going down those little narrow caves that just feel like they're going forever, that was the catacombs in Dueling Dragons, where all the skeletons and skulls would be. But no pun intended, they've done a really, really good job hiding the bones of what used to be, right? Like, I think regular guests going through the park are gonna go through that queue and never really think about Dueling Dragons or Dragon Challenge, even though the building has been kind of the exact same for all these years. But if you're a true Universal fan, or if you're watching this video, hopefully that jogged your memory on the former Dragon Challenge and Dueling Dragons queue. But apart from those fun little looks into the past, that's really kind of all I got. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making this, finding this stuff. You know, I'm a big fan of coming to these parks, and I love all the history of this place. And Universal is a place that the history is getting bigger and better as the years go on. So it's nice to be able to look back in certain areas and see the things that we used to love when visiting these parks in the 90s, in the 2000s, and that, you know, maybe in the future, you might get to share with your grandkids or your nephews or whoever, right? We love Universal. We love Universal history. It's time for me to go home, though. Thank you guys for watching another Vincent Vision. If you guys like this video and you want more Universal content like this, I've got it on this channel right over here. All you got to do is hit subscribe. I think it's over here. You hit that button. It's gonna really help me out. Like this video as well, kind of pushes us up to the top, gets it more exposed to people who love Universal content like you guys. And of course, thank you to my lovely Patreon supporters. These guys help me go the extra mile and make some extra special videos throughout the year. If you're looking to support me a little extra, it's $5 a month. Your name will show up with these guys right over here.